Optimal solver solution.
All right. Hopefully everyone learned about Pareto optimal exchange without money and top trading cycles algorithm last class. Just to maybe start with a couple admin stuff. Everyone knows the midterm is Thursday. I've posted a practice midterm on Piazza. I'll post the solutions tonight, so that should give you some idea of like what kind of object a midterm is. So any questions about that kind of stuff? Otherwise, I'll keep going. So last lecture, which Natalie gave, this was sort of the first lecture in what I would describe as like the mechanism design portion of the class rather than the game theory portion of the class. So at a high level, when we were studying for the first half of the class, right, we were sort of trying to come up with some family of models to try to predict what people are going to do when we put them in a strategic interaction, and they've got particular rules they've got to follow and particular incentives. And then sort of in broad strokes, mechanism design is sort of saying, okay, we've got some theory for what people are going to do in strategic interactions. Let's think about if we, as the mechanism designers, have goals, how we can set up the strategic interactions so that what they will naturally do is what we want. So for example, if what we want is to arrange for a Pareto optimal allocation where people can misreport their preferences, then the top trading cycles algorithm that you guys saw last class accomplished that, right? Like in specifying an algorithm, it induced a game. The action space of the game was the set of preference orderings you could report to the algorithm. The algorithm, that was the object that induced the mapping between your actions, your reported preference orderings, and the outcome, who gets which kidney. And you have preference ordering, so you have preferences over outcomes. And the nice thing about the top trading cycles algorithm was not only was it a good algorithm, not only did it find efficiently Pareto optimal allocations for the preferences that were actually reported to it, but it sort of incentivized in dominant strategies that people should truthfully report their preferences, right? So that's the thing about like mechanism design rather than just algorithm design. It's not enough to find a good solution with respect to the inputs you're given, because the inputs you're given might not be the real inputs if people are being strategic. Like your goal is to find a good solution with respect to the real inputs. And so you simultaneously have to figure out how to find a good solution with respect to the inputs you're given, but such that people are incentivized to give you the correct inputs. Okay, and so sort of the top trading cycles algorithm, that was sort of a first anecdote in this area to figure out how to do that for Pareto optimal exchange. Okay, so one special thing about the sort of the exchange setting from last class is that it did not involve money. Okay, so for money turns out to be super useful, and starting next lecture after spring break, we're going to start thinking about mechanism design in settings that involve money and auctions, and there's lots of stuff we can do there. But what I want to do this class is sort of revisit a problem that I'm sure you've encountered before, maybe like in an algorithms class, sort of this stable matchings problem, but sort of think about it through our new lens, not just as an algorithm design problem, given preferences, how do you find a stable matching, but sort of think about it with sort of our mechanism design hats on. First of all, like how do you find a good stable matching? And, I want everyone to think about whether the mechanism we give makes it a good idea, makes it incentive compatible for you to report your true preferences, or whether you could misreport by gaming, and whether it matters sort of what part of the, what side of the mechanism, you're on. So, so that's the agenda for today. Like we'll start off with familiar stuff for everyone who's seen stable matchings, but hopefully there'll be some new stuff too. As a show of hands, who has seen like stable matchings in some form before? Okay, lots of people. I think this is like probably something you do in like 121 or something, or maybe we use a new numbering system now, 1,210. We've added zeros. Okay. Like inflation. Okay. Okay, so like, what are stable matchings about? They're about two-sided matching markets. And when Gale and Shapley wrote their original paper on stable matchings, they were talking about marriage markets. So the two sides of the market were men and women. But that's not cool to talk about anymore. It's too heteronormative. So we don't talk about men and women anymore. We're going to talk about students and schools. And actually, that is, like, it's not just that marriage between men and women is too heteronormative. It's that we don't run centralized markets for marriage. Like, that's not how dating actually works. But this, we'll talk a little bit about this. We'll talk, like, this actually is used for matching medical school graduates with their residencies. So this is a better application area for a number of reasons. But the point is, there's two sides of the market. Okay, let's say students and schools. And they mutually have preferences over the other side of the market. Okay, so students have a ranking over, like, say, the medical schools they'd like to do their residencies at. Okay, like maybe I, for whatever reason, prefer Harvard Medical School over Indiana State. And the schools also have preference orderings over the students. Okay, so I want the students who got good grades in medical school and went to good medical schools. Okay, so two sides of the market that have preferences over the other, but it's like important that it's a bipartite graph here. Like, I can't match a student to a student or a school to a school. And so for simplicity, we will assume in this lecture that each school has exactly one slot for a student. We match one student to one school and vice versa. But that part's actually, like, really for simplicity. That's not necessary. Everything we say will sort of generalize very easily to the setting where each school has multiple slots. Maybe Penn Medicine Gastroenterology has 6 slots for like 6 residents or whatever. Okay, so still you can't match a student. Sorry, you can't match a student to more than one school, but you can match a school to more than one student. Everything we say today will generalize very easily to that case, but just for sort of simplicity, we'll imagine this is a one-to-one matching, which means every medical school wants exactly one resident, for example. And again, we'll try to find a solution that doesn't use money. Okay, so like in sort of this sort of medical school residency, problem is where this is really used as an example of that. Of course, residents are paid, but the salary is not what is used to clear the market, right? And so similarly, matching students to schools, Penn is very expensive, but the tuition is not what we use to clear the market. It's not like what's happening at Penn is we hold an auction and just raise the price of tuition until exactly the number of, until the 1,000 slots or whatever, the 2,000 slots in the freshman class, until we don't just raise the price until there's only 2,000 applicants. Okay, you could, right? That's how lots of markets work, but it's not how schools typically work, right? Right. So if you think of college admissions, that's another setting where students have preferences over schools, schools have preferences over students, and even though money is involved, there's tuition. Money is not what we use to perform admissions, usually. Okay. Okay, and the Gale-Shapley algorithm, which we'll probably seen before and we'll see again this lecture, it is used like in real life in various places. So it's used to match medical students to their first residencies. I understand it's used to match pledges to sororities. It's used in cities like New York City to match a public school students to public schools. Yeah. Okay. So remember, we're talking about schools and students. I will abbreviate schools with M and students with W. Okay, so we've got these two sets of sort of players in this game, really, of two types. M are schools, W are students. And let's assume, again, just for simplicity, to make the math work out nice, that there's the same number of each. Although, again, this will generalize to settings where it's not. Okay, but for now, we've got n students, n schools, and every school wants exactly one student. And so, like what we're looking for is an assignment of schools to students that will satisfy the demand for every school and every student. Like basically the difference is if there's an imbalanced market, the short side of the market, say there are more schools than students, the short side of the market will have to have some schools unmatched. Okay, so it's very easy to generalize all of the algorithms we're going to talk about to that case, but just to make life nice, let's imagine that the market is balanced. Okay, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to, and so far we're just talking about like the algorithmic problem that you will be familiar with. We're trying to find a matching. So what's a matching? Well, it's just an assignment of schools to students and vice versa, so that every school is matched to exactly one student and every student is matched to exactly one school. Okay, so you can think about it as just some function. Can take as input a school or a student. It'll also output a school or a student. If it takes as input a school, it'll output a student. If it takes as input a student, it'll output a school. And what we want, and it's like symmetric. So for like consistency, if I've got a school and a student, and my matching function says school M is matched, or sorry, student M is matched to school W, it should also be that when I ask it what is school W matched to, it should say student M. Okay, so it's just a mu here is just the function that tells you what each student or school is paired with in the matching. And a matching is just an assignment of schools to students so that every student is assigned to exactly one school and every school is assigned to exactly one student. Okay, does that make sense? Questions about the basic setup? Okay. Okay, so far, we could assign any student to any school. What do we care? But the students care and the schools care. So the way we're going to model that is sort of the same way we modeled preferences over goods in the exchange problem last lecture. Okay, so students will have ordinal rankings. Okay, we won't think of them as having like utility functions. We could, but we won't think about them as having utility functions mapping schools to like numbers, how happy you are with Harvard compared to how happy you are with Yale. Instead, students will just have preference ordering. So you'll sort of, every student M will just have a ranked list ordering of schools. Penn at the top, then Harvard, then Princeton, then Yale, so on and so forth. Similarly, every school has a strict preference ordering over the students. So again, we're not modeling schools as having cardinal utility functions. It's not like, you are a value 0.92 student and I am a value 0.83 student. They're not assigning real numbers like a utility function would. It's just a ranking. Okay, so the schools read all the applications or whatever, and they just order the students in their rank order preference, which is represented by this preference ordering. And it's not like every student has to agree on the ordering of schools or vice versa. Like every student might have their own idiosyncratic ordering over schools, and every school might have their own idiosyncratic ordering over students. Okay, make sense? Okay. And there's sort of two things we want when we want to design like a mechanism. So first of all, like we'd like to find a matching that is good in some sense. Okay, that's sort of like the algorithmic problem. Find a good matching. And cognizant of the fact that we're doing this in a strategic environment, that like when the medical school match is run, right? Like there's literally a centralized mechanism that's run, and there, you submit your ordering over schools to it, and then on match day, someone presses a button and it says what school you're gonna spend the next couple of years at doing your residency. That's a big deal, right? You're gonna like move somewhere. It's gonna affect your future career. So to the extent that you have any ability to game the system and misreport your preferences to try to get a better residency, you've got every incentive to do so. And so we don't want that to happen, because if everyone's trying to game the system to greater or lesser degrees of sophistication, then we could find a great matching according to the reported preferences, but find a terrible matching with respect to the real preferences, because the reported preferences would not be equal to the real preferences. Okay, so like what we'd like to do is to come up with an algorithm that can simultaneously find a good matching, whatever that means, but in a way, a good matching, whatever that means with respect to the reported preferences, but in a way so that students are actually incentivized to report truthfully their preferences. So we can therefore, have some confidence that the reported preferences are the true preferences, and therefore that when we found a good matching with respect to the reported preferences, it's actually a good matching with respect to the real underlying preferences. Okay, so this is sort of the same general philosophy from sort of last lecture where we talked about Pareto optimal exchanges, but I think it's worth dwelling upon. This is like the key thing in like mechanism design and how it differs from algorithm design. It's like not enough to find a solution that is good with respect to the reported preferences if you're in a strategic environment where the reported preferences might not reflect reality. You need to additionally have some reason to believe that the reported preferences reflect reality. And one way to do that is to arrange the incentives so that nobody has any incentive to misreport their preferences. Okay, does that make sense in general? Okay. All right, and just to sort of like foreshadow, like, so last lecture when we talked about the top trading cycles algorithm and Pareto optimal allocations, we were able to hit it out of the park. We could find like a Pareto optimal allocation, and it made it a dominant strategy for every participant to truthfully report their preferences. Things are going to be a little more nuanced for the stable matching problem. Okay, as we're going to see, in some sense, we're going to be able to find good matchings in a very strong sense, like it's not going to just be that we can find Pareto optimal matchings. You're right. Remember, Pareto optimality means, okay, like I can't strictly improve for everybody. Like, maybe I can improve for some students, but only at the cost of making things worse for other students. We're going to be able to find good matchings in sort of an implausibly strong sense. We're going to be able to find what is simultaneously the favorite stable matching for every single one of the students. It's not even clear that that should be possible a priori, but we'll be able to do it. But we'll be able to do it only while incentivizing one side of the market to report their preferences truthfully. So we'll be able to rig things up so that the students have no incentive to lie. But if we do that, the schools might have incentive to lie. And we'll be able to rig things up so that the schools have no incentive to lie. But if we do that, the students might have incentive to lie. And on the next homework, you'll prove that this is unavoidable, that sort of there's no way to find stable matchings that incentivizes both sides of the market to tell the truth. Okay, so that's sort of the one slide spoiler. High level question. Oh, yes. They know the mechanism, yes. So like in general, we're not trying to like the mechanism is public knowledge. Like it's not like if you didn't know what mechanism I was using, it's not clear how we'd even like reason about incentives, because like you wouldn't know the mapping between your reports and the outcomes. Maybe we could talk. You have some like distribution over beliefs about what mechanism but like we're going to keep things simple. But like we're not going to try to keep secrets. Like the mechanism is public knowledge. We want, in this case, where you know exactly the mapping between reports and outcomes, that it should be truthful. And if you think about this, Like anything else would sort of be unworkable. Like think about the medical school match. Like maybe the first year I could like keep it secret and confuse people, but like this is run every single year. So it's not like I can really hope to like keep what's happening a secret. Everyone can in principle observe the input-output behavior. Good question. Good question. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you tell these stories, it's a dominant strategy for everyone to tell the truth. So like they're going to do it. But like actually like there are documented cases where you run dominant strategy truthful mechanisms and people misreport basically because they don't understand that it can't help them to misreport. Right? So even when you're, like when you start putting these things into practice, it gets even more complicated. Even if you have a dominant strategy truthful mechanism, that's not a guarantee that people will tell the truth because they might not understand it. So if you go down this road and look at the literature, there are definitions for something that's called obvious strategy proofness and some empirical evidence that people are more likely to tell the truth if the mechanism is obviously strategy proof. And obvious strategy proofness is some technical condition, but it's supposed to capture some class of mechanisms that are easy to see have no gain by lying. So I would guess that schools misreport, but like also students, even though they shouldn't. Good question. Other questions? Yeah.
Incentivized to lie or misrepresent? Is it just normalized to like a different kind of equilibrium, or does it kind of get thrown into AI?
Yeah, then it's hard to say what would happen. But the students are incentive when you run the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, which we'll see in a moment. The students are it's not just that in equilibrium they should tell the truth. The students are incentivized to tell the truth no matter what the school's for. That's an advantage of trying to cause truth telling to be a dominant strategy, which is what we did last class and is also going to happen here, as opposed to merely a Nash equilibrium. If it were only a Nash equilibrium, you can talk about that too, right? You can talk about truth telling in Nash equilibrium, but then if only some fraction of people do it, the whole thing might fall apart. Because if it's a Nash equilibrium, the only promise is that it's a good idea for you to tell the truth if everyone else is doing it. And you might, we did this guess 2/3 of the number game, like you might suspect that there's some fraction of the people who aren't gonna do, the natural thing, and then maybe you shouldn't either. But if truth telling is a dominant strategy, then you don't have to worry about what other people are doing. They might, not get it. It's still a good idea for you to tell the truth. And that's the form of incentives here. Good question. Other question? Yeah. Yeah, although it's symmetric. So if you wanted to rig it for the schools instead, you could. Right? The way we've set things up, there's no difference between students and schools. It's just different names we're giving to different sides of the market. Okay. Okay. So we want to find good matchings. What's a good matching? So let's start with like a very minimal thing, which is sort of an equilibrium-like condition, which is stability. Okay, so you've heard of stable matchings before, but let me sort of now try to motivate it as sort of an equilibrium-like condition. So the point is like, let's think about, maybe the medical match. Like it's run by this organization, right? On match day, you get an email saying, you're matched to Penn, you're matched to Harvard, whatever. But like, it's not a binding contract. Like in the end, you're gonna sign an employment contract with the actual organization that's gonna employ you. So like, ultimately, these are suggestions, but they're, without the power of enforcement. Okay, so like the whole thing would fall apart if people didn't follow the suggestions, of course, right? Like then you'd have a chaotic market where everyone would, be trying to, find special deals with everyone else. And so you could imagine that, like I really want to be matched to Penn Medicine. On match day, I find that I'm matched to like Harvard Medicine and I'm terribly disappointed. And so I call up Penn Medicine and I say, man, this like match day thing was like super disappointing. I wanted to be matched to Penn. I wasn't. What if you are running the match and want these suggestions to sort of have a stability property? If you don't want it to all fall apart when I make that phone call, what you want Harvard to say is, what you want Penn to say is, of course you're disappointed. Like, like we much prefer the person we're matched to than you. Like, sorry, them's the breaks, right? Because then I go and cry, but I can't do anything about it. What you don't want to happen is that when I call up Penn, they say, oh my gosh, like we were just about to call you up. Like we were matched to this idiot. Like we'd love to be matched to you instead. And say, okay, like forget the match. Like I'm gonna, I'll just hire you as a resident, and then the idiot has to go start making phone calls because he doesn't have any job. And then if that were to happen, the whole thing would just unravel, right? So the thing about a matching market is, compared to like the games we've been thinking about, is that it no longer makes sense to think about unilateral deviations, right? Like you suggest that I be a Harvard resident, but I'd prefer to be a Penn resident. I can't unilaterally deviate. I can't just say, no, I'm going to go to Penn. Like I need Penn to agree. Okay, so the natural notion of unilateral deviation, if I'm worried about a matching unraveling, is that there should be a pair on two sides of the market, a student and a school, who would both prefer to deviate and be matched with each other than to the person or school they're matched with in the proposed, in the suggested match. Okay, and stable matchings are asking for exactly that stability property, that there should be no pair that would prefer to unilaterally deviate. Okay. Okay, so it's like, you've seen probably the definition of stable matchings before, but I want you to sort of think about it now as like an equilibrium-like condition. Okay, so first of all, like, what does it mean that a matching is unstable? Well, if there's a school and a student who are not matched to each other, okay, so I'd really like to be matched to Penn, but we're not matched together. We'll call this pair, M and W, the school and the student, a blocking pair for the matching. If the student would prefer to be matched to the school than to who she's currently matched to, and the school would prefer to be matched to the student than to who it's currently matched to. Okay, so this is like, oh, right. So right, that's a blocking pair. That's a pair that would deviate, right? Like, me and Penn, I call up Penn, they say, great, I'd prefer to be matched to you than to the idiot I'm currently matched to. That's a blocking pair. And it's a witness of instability because this is a pair that could mutually benefit by leaving their suggested partner and matching with each other instead. And a matching is stable if it has no blocking pairs. If the only possible response when I call up Penn and say, hey, like match day sucks, I'd prefer to be matched with you, is that Penn should say, haha, I'm sure that's true, but we wouldn't prefer to be matched with you, right? Stability is the condition that when you propose to any preferred partner that you prefer to be matched to them, that they laugh in your face and say they prefer their current partner than to you. Okay, does that make sense? So it's an equilibrium-like condition. It means there's no, sort of the unit of deviation in a matching market is pairs of schools and students. And this is saying there's no pair that can benefit from deviating from the suggested matching. And that's why the suggested matching is stable. So so just as like, when we talked about traffic routing games, we sort of said, okay, if you're like Google Maps or Waze and you're in the position to suggest routes to people, but you're not in a position to like lock them in their cars and cause them to drive where you say, then you can suggest any collection of routes that is a Nash equilibrium, or maybe even a correlated equilibrium. And people will have, those should be sort of suggestions that are followed. People will have no reason to deviate from those. And so you can sort of try to select amongst the best set of those when you're trying to figure out what to implement. Similarly here, if we're suggesting a matching, we can maybe suggest stable matchings and believe that they'll be followed. And maybe we can optimize amongst the set of stable matchings if there's more than one. But if we suggest things that are not stable matchings, then we have good reason to think that they won't be stable, that the market will unravel. Okay, questions about this stability as like an equilibrium concept? Okay, so with that analogy, if we sort of think of, a matching is stable or not, sort of like saying, an action profile is at equilibrium or not, then sort of in our design space of what we can implement, we have to implement stable matchings, but we might want to, right, there might be more than one stable matching, and we might want to select like the best one, right? So let's sort of think about, right, so I want to think about eventually computing sort of the best stable matching and what we can do there in terms of incentives. But first, I want to remind ourselves that stable matchings even exist. Okay, so for those of you who've studied stable matchings, like just as an algorithmic problem in 121 or something, you'll have seen this before, but I think it's sort of useful to remind ourselves what the Gale-Shapley algorithm is, and in particular, that it's not just an algorithm for finding a stable matching, but also like a proof of existence. Like, it is not clear a priori, given the definition of stable matchings, that for every set of preferences, there always exists a stable matching. And the Gale-Shapley algorithm is an existential proof that stable matchings always exist for any set of preferences, because it's a concrete way of finding one. Okay, so here's like the existential statement. And again, think about this as sort of like a similar statement to the fact that there exists a Nash equilibrium in any finite game, right? Like, it's not obvious a priori, but to the extent that like we want to implement stable states, it's like useful that they exist. Okay, so this is sort of the existential version of Gale and Shapley. For any set of preferences for the schools, for every set of preferences for the students, a stable matching exists. Okay, not a priori obvious. And the proof, which you've probably seen before, is algorithmic. Like, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze an algorithm that finds stable matchings. It's the Gale and Shapley deferred acceptance algorithm. And the fact that it always finds a stable matching, no matter what input you give it, implies in particular that they always exist. So we've talked about this already. There's a symmetry in this problem, right? It's a two-sided market, and you've sort of arbitrarily called one side the students. We've arbitrarily called the other side the schools. But the algorithm is going to be like asymmetric. One side of the market will be like applying to the other side, right? The students will be applying to the schools rather than the schools applying to the students. But of course, you could implement it the other way. So the way I'm going to show it to you is called the student applying deferred acceptance algorithm. But symmetrically, there's the school applying deferred acceptance algorithm. And we're going to see that it matters which one you implement. Like, either way, you'll find a stable matching, but it'll be a different stable matching. And that'll matter when it comes time to evaluate the quality of the matching from the perspective of either the students or the schools, and the incentives that the students or the schools have to report truthfully. Okay, so if you're in the position of either in some matching market receiving proposals or making proposals, like, you have reason to care about which side of the market you're on. Okay, so don't look at this for a moment, because I just want to like remind you in English what the student applying deferred acceptance algorithm is. because it's an extremely intuitive thing. And then I'll sort of walk through this wall of text and you'll see it's just what I said. So yeah, so the idea, I think Gale and Shapley had this in mind as sort of, like a model of 1950s dating. So basically what's going to happen is students are going to apply to schools or propose to schools, the way Gale and Shapley said it. The schools will tentatively hold on to their best offer so far. And when they receive a better offer, according to their own preference ordering, they receive a student, if a student applies to them that they prefer more than the student who's tentatively matched to them, they'll reject the student they're currently matched to, and they'll tentatively accept the new student. Okay, so what happens at the beginning is every student applies to their most preferred school. Every student applies to the school at the top of their preference ranking. Okay, now it might be that many people want to go to Harvard Medical School, so maybe Harvard Medical School gets a lot of applications. Maybe there's some other schools that don't get any applications at this first round. Okay, what do the schools do? Well, if you're a school that doesn't get any applications, there's nothing to do. You're not matched to anyone yet. If you're a school that got a lot of applications, you can only be matched to one person. And so what you do is you look at all of the applications you've received, and you tentatively accept the student who applied to you who you prefer the most. Okay, so you immediately reject every student who applied to you who is not your top ranked choice among the set that applied to you. And you tentatively, but not permanently, accept the student who applied to you who's your top ranked choice. Okay, this is why it's called the deferred acceptance algorithm, because students are tentatively accepted, but they might be rejected later. Like we're sort of deferring permanent acceptance until the end of the algorithm. Okay, so that happens. And now some of the students are tentatively matched to schools, right? Any student who was the first choice student for the school they applied to, they're tentatively matched to that school. But there's plenty of students likely who at this point are unmatched. They were rejected by the first school they applied to. Okay, but they've got this preference ordering. So now what are they going to do? Well, each unmatched student, we'll do this in any order. Pick any unmatched student. They will look at their preference ordering and any school that's already rejected them, they'll cross that off their list. They'll apply to the school that is the top of their preference ordering that has not yet rejected them. Okay, they'll apply to that school. Now that school will receive their application, and maybe that school has not yet received any applications, in which case, great, that school will tentatively accept the student. Or maybe the school has already received some applications and so is tentatively matched already to another student, in which case the school will look for an opportunity to trade up. If the student the school is already tentatively matched to, the school prefers to the student who just applied, then the school will reject the current applicant. Or if the application the school just got is from a student that the school actually prefers to the one that the school is currently tentatively matched to, the school will now reject whoever they were previously matched to and will tentatively accept the new student who just applied. Okay, and that's it. Then we just continue, right? That at any given moment, there might be some unmatched students because, maybe they were rejected last round from the school they were tentatively matched to. Those students apply to their most preferred school amongst the set of schools they haven't yet applied to and been rejected from yet. And the schools are always just looking for opportunities to trade up. They accept if and only if the student is preferred to the student they're currently tentatively matched to, in which case they reject the student they're currently tentatively matched to, who goes back into the pool of students applying. Okay. And this is all the pseudocode says. So we're sort of tentatively maintaining this matching that's being updated along the way. Initially, none of the students are matched. Then each student applies to his most preferred school. And among the students that applied to it, each school becomes matched to the student who is most preferred by that school according to that school's preference ordering. And then if there still exists any unmatched students, the student applies to his most preferred school he hasn't yet applied to. If the school he just applied to prefers the student over whoever is currently matched, we just update the bookkeeping, we reject the student that was previously matched to the school, we match the school to the student who just applied. And this continues until hopefully everyone's matched and we have a full matching. Yeah.
Explain this the if basically the rejection of the current student, like why would we approach that case?
Yeah, so it might, right, so you've applied somewhere and you've been tentatively accepted. You might be tentatively accepted to that school for a while. People apply, but the school likes you, you're tentatively accepted to that student, to that school. Okay, but then I apply and the school prefers me to you. And so now that school like accepts me and rejects you. Now I'm tentatively matched to the school and you're back in the application pool. You have to start applying by going down your list some more.
But if there was already a match that occurred before this, why wouldn't that match have occurred? You see what I'm saying? Like when you hit the while, now there's unmatched students.
So students can go, so the way this is working, and this will be like relevant in a moment. Like let's think about the dynamics both from the perspective of the students and the schools. The schools sort of have this monotone behavior. The schools for a while might be unmatched. And then they will all of a sudden go to being matched the first time a student applies to them. And then from that point on, if a school is matched, they'll continue to be matched, right? Because they only reject the student who's matched to them when they have the opportunity to trade up. So schools go from being unmatched to being matched once, then they stay being matched, and the quality of the student they are matched to according to their own preference is just monotonically increasing. For students, it's different. For students, you could be matched, and then you could be unmatched, then you could be matched again, and then you could be unmatched. And the quality of the schools you are matched to over time is going down because you started at your favorite and you're going down. Okay, so like this pool of unmatched students, like you could be in it, but then you could be out of it, but then you could be back in it. We're going to keep going until everybody is matched. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good. Other questions? Okay. So, right, so the Gale and Shapley theorem, there always exists stable matchings. Like really what the theorem says is that this algorithm always halts and finds a stable matching. That the algorithm always halts and it produces a matching, and that's a stable matching. And if we can prove that, then in particular, we've proven that for every set of preferences, there exist stable matchings because just run the algorithm that gives you a particular one. So the first thing we need to establish is that the algorithm like halts at all, right? Like it might be that this while loop, like just runs forever, in which case it's not even like an algorithm, like it might never return anything. Okay, so the first thing we need to establish is that this is in fact an algorithm. You can run it and it will halt, output something. Okay, and so like the way to think about this is to notice that every school will receive at least one application over the course of the run of this algorithm. Well, how come? Well, if there's a school, remember there's n students and n schools. If there's a school that's never received an application, then it's unmatched. But this is like a one-to-one matching we're finding. So if there's an unmatched school, there's also an unmatched student. And the student has this unmatched student has a total preference ordering over all of the schools. They're going to keep applying, going down their list until they've applied to every single school and have had every single school reject them. But like, if there's the unmatched school would accept this student if they applied to it because they're currently unmatched. So, so if the algorithm, so every school will receive at least one application over the course of the algorithm, which means every school will be matched by the end of the algorithm because a school always accepts its first application and a school never goes from being matched to being unmatched in this algorithm. So because every school receives at least one application, by the end of the algorithm, every school must be matched and stayed matched for the rest of the algorithm. And since there's the same number of students in schools, once all of the schools are matched, all of the students are matched as well. So one-to-one matching. Okay, and so once all the students are matched, that's the halting condition of the algorithm. The algorithm does indeed halt. In fact, it halts after at most n squared applications, after at most n squared sort of applications have been sent out, because nobody ever, no student ever applies to the same school twice. So in the worst case, every single student has to apply to every single school in their list exactly once. Well, there's n students, each student has a ranking over n schools. That's n squared applications that might need to be sent out. Okay, so like, so this thing is like an algorithm. It like halts and it outputs a matching. Okay, relatively quickly. Does that make sense? Okay. So to finish the sort of Gale-Shapley theorem, we need to establish not just that it outputs a matching, but that the matching is a stable matching. Okay, so remember what that means. We have to establish that the matching does not have any blocking pairs. Okay, that's the definition of a stable matching. What is a blocking pair? Well, okay, let's suppose otherwise, right? Proof by contradiction. Suppose the thing output is not a stable matching. In particular, there is a blocking pair, M1 and W1. Well, remember what a blocking pair is. M1 and W1 are a blocking pair if they are not matched to each other in the final matching, but they would both prefer to be matched to each other compared to who they are matched to. So in particular, M1 would prefer to be matched to W1 compared to the school he's actually matched to, and W1 would prefer to be matched to M1 compared to the student that it's actually matched to. Okay, so like if there is a blocking pair, let's think about it. Like in particular, like, well, we know that M1 prefers W1 to the school that he's actually matched to. And we know how the algorithm works. The students propose to schools in order of their preference. So in that case, it must have been when we were running the algorithm that M1 actually did apply to W1 before he applied to the school he was actually matched to. But like, since in the final matching, he's not matched to W1, he must have at some point been rejected from that school. He must have been rejected to W1, from W1, right? Like either at the round he applied, or maybe he was tentatively matched to W1 for a while, but then at some future round was rejected. Okay, and so W1 must have at some point rejected M1, and W1 must have rejected M1 in favor of some applicant. Let's call the other applicant M prime, that W1 preferred to M1, right? Because that's how the schools work. The schools reject applicants in favor of particular other applicants that they prefer. Okay, so we know that M1 was rejected by W1 in favor of some other student, M prime. Now, M prime might not be who W1 is matched to in the end. M prime might have himself been rejected by W1 later in the algorithm, but we know that schools, the sort of quality of the students that are matched to a particular school is monotonically increasing over the course of the algorithm, according to the preference ordering of that school, right? Because schools only reject applicants if they have the immediate opportunity to match with an applicant they more prefer. So we know that whoever is matched to school W1 in the end must be preferred by that school to M prime. And M prime similarly is preferred by that school to M1. And since these are transitive orderings, we know that W1 must prefer the student that it is matched to M1. But that's a contradiction to our assumption that M1 and W1 was a blocking pair, right? Because the other side of the coin to M1 preferring W1 to the school he was matched to is that for this to be a blocking pair, W1 must prefer M1 to the student that it is matched to. And we just established that that's not the case. Like it must actually be the case that W1 prefers the student that it's matched to M1. Okay, so this is just saying at the conclusion of this algorithm, if there's any student who's tempted to call up Penn and say, screw the medical match, like I'd prefer to just do my residency with you, they're not going to agree to that. They're going to say, no, like we would prefer the student that we were matched to in the medical match. Okay? Okay, so stable matchings exist and we can find them. Like there's this very simple algorithm called the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm that finds them. And symmetrically, you can imagine the school proposing deferred acceptance algorithm that would just swap the role of the students and the schools, right? Like the problem is entirely symmetric, so you could run the algorithm in the other way as well. Okay, does that make sense? So you know of two algorithms to find stable matchings, the school proposing version and the student proposing version, and they are not the same. Okay. Okay, so this is sort of like saying, okay, there exist equilibria. Okay, stable matchings always exist, but we don't want to find just an equilibrium. We'd like to find, a good one according to some metric. So let's maybe think about what that might mean, right? So you might think, okay, well, like a good matching is one where everyone is like matched to their first choice. But it's sort of obvious that in general, that's not feasible. It might be that other people have heard of Harvard as well. And like a lot of people want to be matched to Harvard and there's just not room. Like we can't all be matched to Harvard Medical School for our residencies. And so the solution might be to sort of set our sights a little bit lower, fix a pair M and W, a student and a school. Let's say that W is achievable for M. The school is like achievable for the student, a realistic option. If there exists a stable matching such that the school and the student are matched, right? Like it might be that I really want to go to Harvard Medical School, but like that's not an achievable outcome because I am the absolute worst medical student like on earth. I'm at the very bottom of Harvard Medical School's, ranked order preference list. Lots of people put Harvard Medical School at the top of their list. And so just, there is no, like if I was matched to Harvard Medical School, there would necessarily have to be a blocking pair. Like, if anyone called up Harvard, I'm their last choice. So if anyone called up Harvard and said, I'd prefer to match with you, like Harvard would be like, oh yeah, let's get rid of this loser. Okay, so like, not every, if I'm some student, not every school is achievable, but there might be a bunch of schools that are achievable, right? There might be more than one stable matching. So there might be a whole set of schools that are achievable for me. These are like the realistic options, the set of schools that if I got to arrange everything perfectly, if I got to, choreograph the rest of the matching, okay, in this world, I could be matched to this school. And if everything else was perfectly choreographed, there wouldn't be any blocking pairs. Okay, achievability. Then, like I could think about optimality, not as like I wouldn't ask to be matched to my absolute favorite school. That might not be realistic. But I might ask to be matched to my favorite achievable school. Okay, suppose all of the students, like their dream in their heart of hearts is to be matched to their favorite achievable school. So you might imagine that there are trade-offs here. Like maybe the only way for me to be matched to my favorite achievable school is for you to be matched to your third favorite achievable school, right? Like maybe our incentives are like inherently misaligned. And if that were the case, we could still ask for like Pareto optimality the way we did last class. We could say, okay, like we can't simultaneously match everyone to their favorite achievable school because there's, conflicting objectives, but like we could still try to find like a Pareto optimal matching where we can't make anyone happier without making someone else worse off. But like we could like, shoot for the moon and say, okay, like, but like maybe these trade-offs aren't real. Okay, so let's say that a matching is student optimal if somehow every student is simultaneously matched to their favorite achievable school. Okay, so it's not at all clear a priori that this should be possible, but like imagine it was. We'll call that student optimal, right? A student optimal matching has the following property. If I put all of the stable matchings out on a table and I ask every student from this pile to pick their favorite stable matching, if every single student picks the same matching out of the pile, then it's student optimal. If somehow everyone agrees, if all of the students simultaneously agree which is the best stable matching, that's the student optimal one. If everyone's simultaneously matched to their best achievable partner. Okay, similarly, I could define a school optimal matching. And I could also define a school or a student pessimal matching, right? So if a student optimal matching is one in which everyone is matched to their favorite achievable school, maybe a school pessimal matching would be one in which somehow against all odds, I picked out the stable matching that is uniformly agreed to be the worst possible stable matching for the schools. Every school is simultaneously matched to their least favorite achievable student. Okay, so a student optimal matching is one in which every student simultaneously agrees that this is the best stable matching. Everyone gets matched to their favorite achievable partner. A student pessimal matching is one in which every student simultaneously agrees that this is the worst possible stable matching. Everyone's matched to their least favorite achievable partner. And I can talk about this also from the perspective of schools. Okay, so questions about this? Optimality and pessimality. And just as it was not a priori obvious that stable matchings even exist, it is not a priori obvious that like student optimal matchings exist, right? Like in general, we sort of expect that there should be conflicts in preferences, that in order to optimize for my preferences, I might have to, compromise on yours. Student optimality is sort of speaking to a situation in which that does not arise. But is the definition clear? Okay. So the first claim is that if I run the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, not only does it find a stable solution, not only does it find a stable matching, but it finds a student optimal matching. Okay, so the student proposing version of the deferred acceptance algorithm finds a good matching. It finds somehow against all odds the stable matching that is uniformly agreed by all of the students to be the best possible stable matching. Okay. The statement clear? Okay. So let's think about this. So suppose it weren't true. Right, if it weren't true, there's at least one student who is not matched to his favorite achievable school, right? Like what it means that it's student optimal is every student is matched to his favorite achievable school. So if it's not student optimal, there's at least one student who's not matched to his favorite achievable school, which means as we were running this algorithm, at some point, there was a student who was rejected from his favorite achievable school. Okay? Because he would have applied to his favorite achievable school before he applied to any other school he preferred more. So there must be some first round K for which some student M is rejected from his most preferred achievable school, call that W, in favor of some other student, M prime. Okay? And so in particular, we know that M's favorite achievable school W must have a preference ordering so that school W prefers student M prime to student M. Right? Now, we know that W is achievable for M, right? Like that was the whole premise, that M was rejected by his favorite achievable school W. So what does it mean that W was achievable for M? Well, it means that there's some other stable matching such that M is matched to W, right? Like remember what achievability means. M and W are achievable for each other if there is some stable matching in which they are matched. Okay? So like by definition of achievability, we know that there's a different stable matching, mu, not the one output by the algorithm, but a different one, such that M and W really are matched together. And in particular, like M prime, the student that W prefers over M, must be matched to someone else. Okay, in this other matching, M prime is matched to a school W prime. And in particular, like it must be, therefore, that W prime is achievable for M prime, right? Because there's a stable matching, mu, in which they're matched. Make sense? Okay. So I now claim that M prime had better preferred W to W prime. And the reason is because we assumed that K was the first round at which a student was rejected by his most preferred achievable school W. Okay, so M prime applied to W in our run of the algorithm, right? Because we know that M was rejected by W in favor of M prime. So M prime must have applied to W. And since this was the first round at which any student was rejected by his most preferred achievable school, it must have been that M prime in particular, at this point at which he sort of caused W to reject M, M prime had not yet been rejected by his most preferred achievable school. K was the first round at which that happened. So in particular, M prime can't have applied to W prime and have been rejected. So he applied to W before he applied to W prime, which means that M prime must have preferred W to W prime, because in the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, students propose in rank order of their preference list. And so, we know that W prefers M prime to M, right? That was why W rejected M in favor of this other student M prime. And we also know, since this was the first round at which that happened, that M prime prefers W to W prime. Which means that M prime and W, who might be matched in the matching output by the deferred acceptance algorithm, but are not matched in this hypothetical stable matching mu that we constructed as part of this argument, must be a blocking pair for mu, which contradicts the stability of mu, this hypothetical stable matching we constructed as part of this argument. Okay? And so this can't happen. There can't be a first round at which a student is rejected by his most preferred achievable school. And so no student is ever rejected by his most preferred achievable school. And so the matching output must match every student to his most preferred achievable school. And so the matching output is actually student optimal. Makes sense? So the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, it doesn't just output any old stable matching. It outputs amongst all of the stable matchings, the one universally agreed upon by all of the students to be the best one. In particular, since we have an algorithm that constructively does that, this proves another interesting structural fact that was not a priori obvious, that there is a student optimal stable matching for every set of preferences. Make sense? Okay. So it outputs like a really good matching for the students. This is the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm. And of course, since everything is symmetric, if we ran the school proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, in which the school side of the market applies to the student side of the market, symmetrically, we would have found a school optimal stable matching. So this algorithm is really good for the side of the market that is doing the proposing. What about the side of the market that is receiving the proposals? Well, not so good. So the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm actually finds the school pessimal stable matching. It finds the worst possible stable matching for the schools. In fact, it's like universally accepted by all of the schools that this is the worst possible stable matching. Against all odds, they agree on this fact. Okay, so just as it is like optimizing for the students, like it's not making good decisions for the schools. Okay. In fact, there's this interesting structural property of stable matchings. It's not just this algorithm. Like this algorithm finds the student optimal stable matching, but in fact, the student optimal stable matching is always the school pessimal stable matching. Okay, so somehow like the structure of stability in these matching markets is somehow a little bit inherently adversarial. Like picking a good matching for the students necessarily involves picking a bad matching for the schools and vice versa. If you have a choice about whether to be on the proposing side or the receiving side of a matching market, you prefer to be on the proposing side. Okay, so the claim is actually every student optimal stable matching is school pessimal. So suppose otherwise. Okay, so suppose we've got a, oh, yes. Preferences are strict, so there can't be more than one. You have a unique most preferred achievable partner. Yeah, okay, so suppose like we have a student optimal matching mu and it is somehow not school pessimal. So, okay, so that means, there's a school W matched to a student M, and M is not W's absolute worst choice among their achievable partners. W actually prefers M to some other achievable student M prime. Okay, that's what it would mean that this matching was not school pessimal, that there was at least one school who was not matched to their absolute last choice achievable student. Okay, so again, since M prime is achievable for W, that means that there must be some other stable matching mu prime in which M prime is actually matched to W. Like there is at least one stable matching that at least one of the schools thinks is even worse than this one, in which W is now matched to their partner M prime that they like even worse. And M, W's partner in the original matching, must be matched to someone else. Call M's partner in this new matching mu W prime. Okay, but we know since the original matching was student optimal, okay, and in particular, this other matching mu prime witnesses that W prime and M are achievable. They're an achievable partner. It must be that M actually prefers W to W prime, because mu is assumed to be student optimal, and that means in mu, every student is matched to their most preferred achievable school, and That's W. Okay, so M had better prefer W to W prime. Okay, but let's think about this. W prefers M to M prime, and M prefers W to W prime, and they're not matched together in mu prime. So they're a blocking pair for mu prime, which contradicts the fact that mu prime was supposed to be a stable matching. Okay, so that's it. That school optimal stable matchings must necessarily, well, that direction's also true, but student optimal stable matchings must necessarily be school pessimal and vice versa. School optimal stable matchings must necessarily be student pessimal and vice versa. Okay, does that make sense? So there's two versions of this algorithm, the Gale-Shapley deferred acceptance algorithm. You can have the students propose or you can have the schools propose. Either way, you'll find a stable matching, but it will potentially be a different stable matching. The proposing side of the market gets a stable matching that is optimal for them. The receiving side of the market gets a stable matching that is pessimal for them. Okay. So we're running out of time. So let me, the proof of this theorem is in the slides and you can go over it. But let me tell you the theorem without going through the proof. You can look at the proof yourself. But I think given what we've covered, it's sort of an intuitive statement, right? Like the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm is somehow acting in the interests of the students. It is finding the best possible stable matching for the students in a way that aligns their incentives. It's not that you and I, if you and I are both students, it's not that we will have any disagreement about what is the best stable matching, right? Because there is a student optimal stable matching, it means we will agree that it is the best stable matching. And so maybe you can believe, even before you read through the proof, that this alignment of incentives is a good thing if we're trying to incentivize students to report their true preferences. Okay, so in fact, what's proven on the next few slides is that if you run the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, it is a dominant strategy for the students to report their true preference ordering. Meaning, no matter what, for each student, no matter what the other students, no matter what the schools report, they will only receive a more preferred match in the stable matching computed by the student proposing deferred acceptance algorithm if they report their true preferences compared to if they report anything else. Misreporting your preferences to the deferred acceptance algorithm can only cause you to be matched with someone you prefer less. Okay. Which is a nice property for the student side of the market. And okay, the proof, it's not that complicated, but I think it takes more time than we have, but like, the intuition is very simple. Because there exist student optimal matchings, all of the students have their incentive, and because the algorithm finds student optimal matchings, the incentives of the students are sort of aligned with the objective of the algorithm. Okay, each student would like the algorithm to find the best stable matching for it. It happens because of the student optimality property that the best stable matching for each student is the same stable matching. And that's the one the algorithm finds. And the students are sort of happy with this objective. And so that's why they can't deviate. That's why they can't benefit by deviating. Now, as you can imagine, the same is not true for the school side of the market. Right, so the algorithm is sort of operating against the interest of the schools in that it is finding the worst possible stable matching for the schools. And so maybe you have a similar intuition for why it is not a dominant strategy for the schools to misreport. In fact, the schools might have good reason to misreport. It might be that for the schools, they can get better matches by misreporting. Now, of course, everything's symmetric. We could reverse things. If we ran the school proposing deferred acceptance algorithm, then it would be a dominant strategy for the schools to tell the truth, because the algorithm would now be choosing a stable matching that was aligned with the individual incentives of the schools, but now it would no longer be a dominant strategy for the students to tell the truth. And something that you're going to prove on the homework. Something that we're going to prove on the homework is that it's not like you could come up with a more clever algorithm that would solve this problem, right? Like you might think, okay, like the deferred acceptance algorithm, it's doing okay for the incentives for one side of the market, but not the other side. But maybe like there's some other, like maybe I shouldn't be finding like school optimal and student optimal and school pessimal matchings or vice versa. Like maybe I should find, like something on the interior, something that is neither school optimal nor student optimal, and that'll somehow align the incentives for both sides of the market. One thing you're going to show on the next homework is that you can't do it. Like this is a problem that is inherent to stable matchings. If you have an algorithm that will always output a stable matching given the reported preferences, then there's always a set of preferences for the students in schools such that at least one of the sides of the market has a strict incentive to deviate from truth telling. Okay, so this is a problem that you just cannot solve in a way that makes it a dominant strategy for both sides to tell the truth, both sides of the market to tell the truth. So what sort of deferred acceptance achieves, which is making it incentive compatible for one side of the market, that's sort of the best you can do. All right. Yes.
Yeah, but the school could reject you and take a student they don't actually want more.
Yes, so it's still so it's a dominant strategy for students to tell the truth. So even if the schools try to game and misreport, it's still a good idea for you to tell the truth. But you're right that the matching found will be student optimal for the set of reported preferences, but it's possible that it won't be student optimal for the true preferences. All right, I'll see you next class for the midterm.